Hey, I'm Baby Queen.
Hi, I'm Katie Beza.
Hey, this is Ram McMullen.
Hi guys, Lara here.
Hey, I'm Jim Koala.
Hello, this is Dagny.
And you are listening to Léim.
And you're listening to Léim Thart.
And you're listening to Léim Thart.
It's out now.
I really hope you enjoy it.
So enjoy.
Hello, welcome to Léim Thart. I'm Rory Egan and I hope you're doing well on this morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day you are listening to this episode. If you're new here, then an extra special welcome to you. This is the podcast to get everything music based, whether it is talking to artists who are topping the charts, or if you want a review of the latest album, or if you want some industry news, you will get it here on Léim Thart, which is the Irish for jump around, in case you're listening outside of Ireland. And if you're coming back to listen, then, thank you. As always, thank you for being a listener and being a returning listener. Today's episode is being recorded back in a sort of enclosure of blankets and towels that I used to record during the pandemic when we were all sent into lockdown. And due to kind of the nature of this podcast, the fact that a lot of it is interviews with artists and I tend to be bound more by their schedules than my own, having to schedule recording at a particular time means that it's been a while since I've recorded in here. And I think autumn 2020 was the last time I did an episode in this sort of enclosure. But yeah, back in early 2020, I did a review of Dua Lipa's second album, Future Nostalgia, on the podcast. And that was a very new thing for me because I was reviewing an album using my voice as opposed to using my pen. And it was my first solo Léim Thart episode. And then I followed that up with a few more reviews, some on my own, some with other people. And it felt right to revisit and do a review today for Dua's next album, Radical Optimism, her third one. And it's funny, we're long out of lockdown now, but I'm back in my bedroom of my childhood home to record a review of a Dua Lipa album. And today I'm not entirely alone. I sought out some contributions from people who are well-read and well-versed in Dua Lipa's career. So I asked for their thoughts before the album dropped and afterward. And massive thanks to them for adding so much to this episode. So there'll be a mixture of voice notes and some written opinions from them. And I'm going to read those. I'll read those ones aloud. And they're going to be sprinkled throughout the episode. And if you like what you hear today, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to Léim Thart. It costs absolutely nothing and it makes a huge difference to me because when I go to labels asking for time with their artist, the first question is always to produce a report of my statistics with the podcast and social media, so it helps me big time. And you can find Léim Thart on socials at Léim Thart on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I think those are the three main ones that I'm using at the moment in May 2024, but who knows what new platforms will pop up and which ones will be gone by the next time I'm shouting out my handle. So let's get into it. Radical Optimism, out on the 3rd of May 2024 from Warner Records. Just a little over 4 years since Future Nostalgia. And that was an era. That was quite the era. It won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Album. She did collaborations with, Madonna, Gwen Stefani, Missy Elliott, Mark Ronson, and that's only a few of them. Levitating, the fifth single and the fifth track, became the biggest song of the year in the US in 2021 and is now certified diamond for over 10 million copies sold. She also went on a mammoth world tour in 2022, which landed here in Dublin for 2 nights in the 3 Arena. This included a number of festival appearances too, headlining the likes of Primavera in Spain and a number of outdoor shows with, up to hundreds of thousands of people in the audience. This album really skyrocketed her into a entirely new level of superstardom. There's no denying that. Alongside this, around the time that she was starting her Future Nostalgia Tour, early 2022, she parted ways with her management company. It's a big management firm called TAP, based in the UK. They had been managing her since the start of her career, and from then on, her dad was managing her, who has experience in the industry. And then it was announced late 2023 that she had bought back all of her publishing rights. So she had been publishing her songs through her management company, TAP. They have a publishing company, TAP Publishing, and Dua Lipa was publishing her songs with them. So she shared any money that came in from publishing with them. And she has bought back full ownership of those and has brought them in under her company, which up until this album cycle was just called Dua Lipa Limited, but it has now expanded and is renamed to Radical 22. Not only is this a company to manage her publishing, her master recording rights, which, for the record, she has owned since the very start of her career, and that's majorly impressive. It's also expanding into film production. She has produced a documentary on Camden and the music history of it, which should be coming at some point in the future. There's also a live production aspect, which we don't know anything of yet, but I'd imagine her tours. And then something that I find very interesting about Dua Lipa and has been a part of, we're building our way up to her position within the industry and society at large when she launched herself into Radical Optimism as an era here. Service 95 is her platform that is curated and is kind of like a lifestyle magazine in a way. She commissions articles from people all over the world to learn about art, culture, living, society, politics, current affairs, sport, a wide range of things, and these are delivered via a weekly newsletter. She also hosts a podcast where she's had a big range of guests from her contemporaries like Billie Eilish and Troye Sivan, all the way up to Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. She also talks to a lot of activists too to learn about their cause. And alongside this, she also started a book club, so the Service 95 Book Club. What I find really interesting about Service 95 as a brand is that I do, of course, believe her when she says it's something that she's just interested in, that she has always loved writing lists, because she does give kind of travel recommendations on this, but that she used to have a blog and she loves talking about stuff like that. But also, whether this was intentional or not, this positions her entirely differently within the industry, because it's an unfortunate truth that often female pop stars are viewed as less than, and they're often viewed as maybe being less intelligent or less in control. And what Service 95 does is it shows off that Dua Lipa is well-read, has good taste, is sophisticated, and knows what she's talking about, and is in control. She hosts the episodes of the podcast. She reads the books in her book club. And so Service 95 really kind of marks her out as this sort of tastemaker alongside a pop star. And so as much as I don't know whether she's making much money off of Service 95, aside from obviously the fact that it's the podcast element is hosted by the BBC, so they would pay for that, the sort of cultural currency she's getting back from it is kind of her payoff. Last year, 2023, who could forget her huge success with her contribution to the Barbie movie? Dance the Night was the lead single off the soundtrack, became a smash hit, and she also had a cameo in the movie. So, Radical Optimism. She started the era kind of, I don't have an exact date, but late September, early October 2023, when she started to change a lot of covers. She changed the covers on streaming of her songs to have this kaleidoscopic version of the covers, as if you were looking at the cover through a kaleidoscope, and the same with her profile picture on Instagram. And this eventually led to her wiping her Instagram, which she did before she launched into Future Nostalgia, and then debuting a brand new red hair colour, and began to tease the first single, Houdini. The entire album clocks in at 36 minutes and 15 seconds. She first of all had the single Houdini to lead. She then had Training Season as a second single and Illusion as a third single. 3 songs ahead of release. She announced the album title, cover and date at the same time on the 13th of March. And up to then there had been lots of fan theories that it would be called Vertigo, in reference to Alfred Hitchcock, because the sound up to that point between Houdini and Training Season had felt quite dark. She had dyed her hair red as well, and red is kind of the main colour of the Vertigo poster. And she references feeling vertigo in Training Season. So there were more details that they were speculating, but they thought it was going to be very red and that it would be called Vertigo. But it's not. It's a cover of her in what looks like the ocean or a pool with a shark nearby. And she looks happy as Larry. She's grand. And she announced this all via Instagram Live. And I'm going to come into the first contribution from Ruth, who has sent a voice note about it.
So far, I am loving her aesthetics. I'm loving her vibes. I have to say that her Instagram Live was my favourite part of this whole thing so far, because we were all absolutely gagged when we were waiting just to see what was happening, the countdown and everything, and just people in the comments saying what's happening, what's going on. I just thought that was such a smart way to announce the album, and really kind of a good kind of PR for her team as well. And it's very directed on young people and that demographic. So I just thought that was so smart. And then when the big reveal and she came out at the end, it was just such a fun experience to be a part of as a fan. So that was just something that I really, really loved.
Thank you to Ruth for that. So this album cover and title, once they were announced, caused initially a lot of confusion amongst fans about the drastic change in the vibe and the visuals. But I think with some time now, it ties in with the idea of being radical, having such a 180 shift upon announce compared to the singles and the visuals you've put out before. Because she described the first half of the album as being more radical and the second half as being more optimistic. So it makes sense that the first few months of the campaign had the red colour, felt more dark and radical, and then once the album was announced, things were going to feel lighter and more optimistic, and that then there was kind of a primary colour shift and we went from red to blue. It should also be noted that the 2 singles that came out pre-album announce came from the first half, and the 1 single released between album announce and release date came from the second half. So the title, Radical Optimism. She says she got the name from a friend in 2021 who said the world needs more radical optimism, and that those 2 words really stuck with her. And she says the album title refers to, quote, the idea of going through chaos gracefully and feeling like you can weather any storm. And this ties into the idea of her looking calm and fine in the ocean with a shark nearby. In terms of getting into the composition, lots of this album was written with what she now has been calling her band, with Kevin Parker of Tame Impala fame as the main producer, Caroline Ailin, who is a longtime collaborator of Dua's, who wrote New Rules and Don't Start Now, Danielle Harle, who is a writer and producer on every track, who has written a lot with Caroline Polachek, the PC Music Collective from London, a lot of some Charlie XCX, and the current Ollie Alexander / Years and Years song, Dizzy, along with Tobias Jesso Jr. 4 of them, alongside Dua, 5 people in a band. The vast majority of the album includes either all of these people or a number of these people. And as I mentioned, Danielle Harle is on every track in the credits. We don't at present have any touring news, but we know that she will be headlining the Friday at Glastonbury this year, ahead of some shows throughout the summer, and Royal Albert Hall, a comparatively intimate venue for her, that'll be coming in the autumn. And quick note before we get into the campaign, I should note it's still very fresh, the album, and my opinions are subject to change over time. I'm willing to go back and admit that I was wrong in the future. First single, Houdini. It was teased throughout October after she had cleared her Instagram. She posted a number of very quick snippets, kind of broken apart snippets, like just the bass guitar, just a bit of drum, to give a little but not too much away. And I think she got this balance perfect. Because in an era where people are putting 15 seconds of a song, the 15 best seconds of a song on TikTok, and playing it relentlessly for maybe an entire month, I think Dua got the level just right of giving us a taste of what was happening, but without it becoming annoying. And what she then did was she promptly deleted these posts, because that's part of the song's message, you know? It's a song about seeing if a new suitor can win her over, but win her over fast before she escapes quickly. So she was posting, archiving. And the teasing visuals, or like reels, little videos we saw, had a lot of sounds and imagery of locks, which reference Harry Houdini, the famous escape artist. And eventually she announced the single on the 1st of November and released it on the 9th of November, which was particularly special because the 9th of November is my birthday. So I got the lead single, and put quite simply, it is an incredible lead single. I don't even know what else to say. It's just a smash. It's fresh for her. It's new for her. It has so many great hooks. It gets you dancing. So yeah, I was delighted. This came with a physical release, 7-inch vinyl, CD and cassette, and the music video dropped the same day with her showing the new red hair colour, and she was in a dance studio, kind of turning it into a nightclub of sorts. I have a voice note now from Ruth talking about the Houdini video, and we are going to get into the next two singles afterwards, but there's some notes to it in here.
I just love the video for Houdini so much. The choreography, the hair, it's like, I felt like it was, you felt like you were there in the studio with her dancing around. I just thought it was such a great video, and like it wasn't overdone. Training season as well, I just thought it was such a cool concept with the kind of revolving chair and camera work and everything. And I just have to say, Dua's choreography is always amazing, and it's just great to see how she has improved over the years with her choreography and also her live performances recently that we've seen. I love them all. Illusion as well, the whole set and everything was amazing, and great choreography as well there. But I just thought it was a bit over the top compared to the others. I was like, oh, I'm just thinking back to Houdini, I was comparing it, I was like, that was just so more raw or something. But it's still amazing, but I just preferred Houdini, I have to say, is my favourite one out of the three so far.
Thank you to Ruth for that. Although not everything was perfect with Houdini, it came with some criticism from fans over the timing of the release, because she released the song and in the subsequent weeks did a number of American promo appearances, major promo appearances, the biggest TV shows, and those chats were then entirely focused on her song from the Barbie movie. You know, as much as they're not allowed to say it out loud, we all know it was campaigning for an Oscar, which didn't end up happening. And a lot of people felt like it was a wasted opportunity, that she could have gone and promoted her new single. And a lot of fans were making a lot of comparisons to future nostalgia. It was rife throughout the era. And so people felt like Houdini wasn't reaching the peaks that it could have, and partly because they felt as though it was neglected in favour of campaigning for an Oscar for Barbie. But Houdini, now that we've had it for nearly 6 months, it has remained pretty consistent over time in streaming and on radio. If there's one thing Dua's a master of, it's a sleeper hit. And even on the very first night it came out, it took me 2 listens to get into. The first listen was good, but the second listen was when it really kicked in. Training Season, the second single, released on the 15th of February. She had announced this about 3 weeks in advance, which a lot of fans felt like was too long a wait, to which to be honest, I would just answer back with grow some patience. But she teased it with a Grammy performance and she also performed it at the BRIT Awards. I like Training Season. It's more experimental, not only compared to her previous albums, the contents of those, but also compared to Houdini. As much as Houdini felt new and experimental for her, it was still a bit more along the middle of the road line than Training Season. And I still do think Houdini was the perfect choice for the lead single of the 11 tracks on this album. Training Season, once again, sleeper hit. It got, it took me a few listens before I got into it. And then once it grabs you, it barely lets go. Like Houdini, Training Season peaked at number 2 on the UK singles charts. And I'm going to presume that this is due to also having a physical release like Houdini. And when we move into now Illusion, the third single, which came on the 11th of April, that peaked at number 9 and had no physical release. The physical releases have a big impact on the charts, which is often why in the first week of an album being released, you will always see artists pushing their physical stock or say an iTunes download, because it takes so many streams to contribute to the charts in the same way that just going and buying an album does. Illusion was the third single, as I mentioned, and it was written on the 11th of July, 2022. It was the first song to be written with what she calls the band. And she also said that it was the first song that she felt like everything was working, and it was like a eureka moment that ended up dictating the rest of the album. And she has said this about Levitating on her prior album, Future Nostalgia. She says that in the writing sessions, Illusion was written with the band on their first day together. You're walking into a room with 4 other people, you don't know what to expect. And they wrote Illusion. On the second day, they wrote the album closer, Happy For You. And on the third day, if I'm not wrong, they wrote What You Doing. And so they had planned a week out, and the fact that they had that after 3 days was when she realised she wanted to stick with this team. So now that we've done the 3 singles, we're going to get more into the meat of the album. So I have a contribution here from Connor, who noted that there was a massive vibe change, and the quote I have is, thematically and genre-wise, I feel on a first listen it's a bit all over the place. But I sadly have to somewhat agree. It's a bit all over the place, and I found a number of the songs quite difficult to remember. Ahead of release, she mentioned that, as much as Future Nostalgia was very like disco and dance based, if she's going to like box her albums in, she said that was what that was. And she said, what I want coming up this time is like a psychedelic and Britpop influenced record. And, I was really looking forward to that. I wouldn't be massively into either of those two genres on their own, but I was really excited to see how she drew the influence from them to bring it into a pop record. And I could see that on Houdini, especially. It's a shining example, from the way the drums interact with the bass, to then Kevin Parker just shredding on the guitar at the end, to the synths in the breakdown. It's brilliant. That is not really to be seen throughout the album. It doesn't feel like that. Overall, I would say that the second half is a lot stronger than the first half, which is unusual for a pop album. Because as a pop music person, I've listened to a lot of pop albums, and normally albums are very front loaded, and the second half will be quite forgettable. But I would say overall on this album, the second half is a lot stronger than the first. Houdini would be the main outlier in terms of the first half. It's incredible. Training Season's incredible. Illusion is incredible. But if we're going to go averaging, I would say the second half is better. Both Illusion and Houdini, as singles being released ahead of the album, implied a lot more dancing moments than what was delivered. And lyrically, the album felt less fresh and creative than her previous music on album tracks. Both the first two singles felt very creative and they felt very fresh ahead of release, and they set the bar quite high for how the album tracks would be. You know, I was thinking even back to her first album, self-titled. A lot of the songs were just very quite generic, radio-friendly pop. But what I couldn't get over is that it was like vanilla pop executed at a ridiculously high level. It really was. And then Future Nostalgia felt like she really took that success and was like, okay, now I get to have total control and really wrap something up that's cohesive, because the first album was a bit more scattered, even if it was brilliant. Whereas this one feels a bit short. Although I've said a lot of negative things now. Her vocals, very strong throughout. And her very distinct alto voice is using its full range. It goes from very low notes on the verse for Anything for Love, and then there's very high belting notes on French Exit and Falling Forever. So it is really great to hear a lot of those moments where she really shows off her voice and the sound to it. There were mixed reactions online. I'm not alone here. A lot of people were saying it didn't live up to Future Nostalgia. But many others were noting her growth as an artist and that the music has matured both in quality and in message. Because I very instantly thought Future Nostalgia was going to become her magnum opus once I listened to it in 2020. I was like, no, this is the one. This is going to be her defining album that brings her to unfathomable levels of success. And you only really get one shot at an album like that. So in the lead up to this album, I did manage my expectations, as I would argue that Radical Optimism should never be too heavily compared to Future Nostalgia. I have a contributor here, Sean, who was disappointed and said, I'm always going to compare artists' newest releases to their previous album, and maybe that's unfair considering Future Nostalgia was a highlight of the disaster of a year 2020. I'm with you there, Sean. Taking everything else out of the equation, I still listen back to Future Nostalgia to this day and consider it to be one of my favourite albums. So of course when Dua began her PR run, boosted by the success of the already released Training Season and Houdini, I pre-saved Radical Optimism and watched that countdown like a hawk. And I'd say you're not the only one who was watching that countdown like a hawk, Sean. She has a massive, massive fan base. Referencing a few of the album tracks here, Sean also said that opening with End of an Era and My Hopes Were Still High, thinking it was a nice song to start with. I would disagree. I don't think it's her. I think it's her least strong opener. Her first album opened with Genesis and her second album opened with the title track Future Nostalgia. End of an Era feels quite different to the rest of the album and doesn't really slot in. And as much as I always thought Houdini was a track 2, like even when it was the only bit of information we had was just that Houdini was the first single, I was like, this is track 2 and not a track 1. And, you know, I do think End of an Era is a bold statement to make on your first track, but it's not the best start. Like, dare I say that it sounds like something from Kylie's cutting room floor from the Tension sessions. Tension being her 2023 album. I don't know. There were good moments. The next up was Houdini and Training Season. After that, we have These Walls and What You Doing. Initially, I found these two songs somewhat forgettable, which is likely quite an unpopular opinion, as a lot of fans are enjoying these two, with one fan doing a comparison of track 5s on Radical Optimism versus Future Nostalgia, saying that What You Doing is better than Levitating. I would still disagree with that, but these have grown on me a bit as I've given them more listens, especially What You Doing, because These Walls, a lot of people are noting that it's one of the better lyrical songs, and when I kind of shifted my mind a bit and did think of the lyrics a bit more, it does hit home. It's facing sad reality. From a more analytical mindset, I would say that these walls, as a pairing of words, as a couplet, it's repeated by backing vocals in the chorus, and those two words are sadly just not that sticky, and they don't hook the listener like in Future Nostalgia, the title track, where there's a robotic Future Nostalgia in between lines. But What You Doing is doing pretty good with me. So, moving on, I really liked Falling Forever as well, because there are just incredible vocals. I love the galloping sound of these big drum fills. And on this, she brought in Emily Warren and Ian Kirkpatrick. The two of them wrote New Rules and Don't Start Now alongside Caroline Ailin. So, massive history with Dua Lipa. And I think they did a really, really good job. There's a real yearning to this song, and it sounds like she's quite happy once again. It's in the second half, so she's falling and she wants to fall forever. The song after that, Anything for Love, there's quite a yin and a yang to this, because I really like this song. I like how it starts off a bit more bare and then grows its way into actually quite a groovy song, and then it just ends. I think it's too short. I feel like if it had been made into a full-length song, it could have been like a sister song to End of an Era, and End of an Era wouldn't really stick out like a sore thumb as much. But just as you're getting into Anything for Love, it's over. And I just think that's a bit unfortunate. The last two songs are two of the most mature on the album, Maria and Happy For You. And this is where the optimism has really reached its peak again, because as much as she feels optimistic in the preceding songs, these are where she still has a smile on her face despite situations that should put a frown on. Maria is where she is thanking her current partner's ex for everything that the ex has done to make her partner what he is today. And then Happy For You is being happy for her, an ex of hers, seeing what her ex is doing now and seeing that she isn't sad that her ex has moved on. And I really like the line in the chorus where she says, I must have loved you more than I ever knew, because she's happy. She's not sad, and that she still has love for her ex, even if that love is maybe not romantic love anymore, maybe more on a friendly level, but that she still cares. And it has a really nice outro, quite a long outro to Happy For You, considering the general boundaries accepted within pop music. And Happy For You, to me, feels like the most personal song on the album. As far as comparing to prior albums go, I would say it's better than Future Nostalgia's closing track, Boys Will Be Boys. I'd put it in tight enough competition with her self-titled album's closing track, Homesick. I would still say Homesick has an edge on Happy For You, but it's still a good song. In terms of more closing thoughts, I feel like she had good intentions. I always saw her as someone who has a good eye, and I feel like she has solidified that with the wider population with things like Service 95. But this just at the moment feels like a slight misstep. Say, when I listened to Future Nostalgia, we had Don't Start Now as the first single, title track as an instant grab, Physical as a second single, and Break My Heart as a third single. As soon as I listened, I could hear from listening to the entire body of work, I could plan out her next year for her. And I did. I was like, Hallucinate will be next, and then it will be Levitating. And that's 5 incredible singles. At the moment, I actually don't know which song would be her next single. I'm not saying every song on a pop album has to feel like a single, but you'd normally want to feel like there's going to be another single after release, and that they can sort of really make an era of it. Especially, I hate to do it again, comparing to Future Nostalgia, the pandemic definitely had a part to play in making that era what it was and how long it was. But you don't want just a bunch of singles and then the album comes out and that's kind of it. You do want it to last a bit more. I have another contribution from Sean here. He said, as the album played through, I found myself getting distracted to the point I had to start again from the beginning, thinking I was the problem for not engaging with the album enough. The production and vocals are all fantastic, and the album is one of the more cohesive in her library, but staying consistently vanilla, lacking much character, was her biggest downfall with this album to me. Another thing I'd like to bring up is that she has done a really good job at keeping her private life private for someone of her level of fame, and setting that boundary when in a position like hers. Of course that's important, but I'm not sure if it's paid off here. I feel like she could have been a bit more personal in the stories that she wants to tell. Introduce some new imagery, some new metaphors. She doesn't have to go to like the Taylor Swift level of putting loads of Easter eggs in, because every artist is different. Taylor Swift does the Easter egg thing, does it brilliantly. Maybe that's not right for Dua, but I think she probably needs to start being a bit more specific, as a lot of things, kind of referring to what Sean said there, felt a bit general. I was also asked by Connor, another contributor, will this be her solar power? My interpretation of that question is how Lord's 2021 album, Solar Power, her third album, same as Dua, received quite a mixed reaction, and also had like an album cover that sort of was very blue and embraced nature, looked like someone on holiday, and the cover of Radical Optimism kind of sends the same message. I don't know will it be her solar power, but I've definitely can draw parallels in how the fans are reacting. There's a number of people who are saying, I don't get this, and there's a number of other fans who've developed a frankly annoying superiority complex already that said, oh, I got it immediately, and if you don't get it, you never will. I think that's a bit dismissive towards other fans, but time will tell. As I've said already, Dua Lipa has mastered the sleeper hit. I'm going to give the album time. I would probably place, a grade-wise, somewhere in the kind of mid-60s, let's say 65 for simplicity's sake, which is sadly down from Future Nostalgia's 90%. But I'm going to be patient. I've believed in Dua for a long time, and I don't plan on stopping now. So I'd like to say thank you to my contributors, Ruth, Sean and Connor, for what they have added to this review. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this review, please subscribe to Léim, leave a nice review, and I'll see you next time. Have a lovely day.